All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Boosting Tactical Network Performance and Cyber Resilience with a Modern Approach to Testing. Apposite is excited to partner with FOR to bring you this session. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording with all the registrants after the session. Attendees are muted by default, but we do encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A box. We'll address those at the end of the webinar at the Q&A session. Now I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Cade Nelson from Apposite Technologies. Welcome, Cade.
Thanks, Becca. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's doing great. We're going to do this webinar on a modern approach to testing tactical networks, giving a better preparedness for your tactical networks and hopefully a better performance. Okay, a little about me. My name is Cade Nelson. I've been with Apposite Technologies for over 7 years now. I have about 25 plus years of experience in WAN, TCP, acceleration, and testing. I got into this business, I think in the mid to late 90s. I can't remember anymore. I was actually employee number 56 at Earthlink Network. A little bit about Apposite. We've been in business since 2005, so we're coming up on our 20-year anniversary. We are recognized as the market leader in network emulators, and we are now shaking things up a bit with our traffic generation solution that we've recently launched. Here are some of our customers across various verticals. I think this one we're pretty much interested in the government and military sectors. Some of our notable clients include all branches of the Department of Defense, as well as organizations such as JPL, NSA, DOJ, NASA, and many, many others. I think it says we have 3,000 customers, but we're probably getting closer to 4,000 now. Okay, so why does a tactical network performance matter? Might sound pretty obvious, but let's kind of go over some of the things that we need to overcome, right? We need reliable communications are needed. It's critical for timely and effective decision-making. Poor communication leads to delays and compromised choices. We also have challenging environments. So effective operations in diverse network environments need to be dependable, whether it's on the battlefield or areas with limited infrastructure. There are going to be attacks. Tactical networks are prime targets. You need to be prepared, as attacks are going to be inevitable. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So in summary, reliable communications, adaptability to environments, and a robust cybersecurity are vital for a succession mission execution. So the real world conditions are complex nowadays. Situations can shift between radio, satellite, land, and even maybe traverse or tunnel over the internet. So you might need to often jump seamlessly from one of those to another, all through these different networks. As new network technology emerges, it's only going to get more complex. There are many imperfect networks that need to be tested for a mission success, right? So we need to make sure we're testing every scenario we can think of that we are going to see in the real world. And it's best to test in the lab before you go to production. So there are a few different pain points when it comes to testing these types of networks. First is reproducing these real world scenarios. So test lab environments tend to fail recreating like volatile and imperfect conditions of tactical networks. Things like weather interference and latency, and also switching from one type of medium to another So it's very imperfect. And when you're in the lab, it's difficult to reproduce these scenarios. We also want to simulate the traffic behavior, right? We want to generate realistic high scale traffic that mimics the real world and a mix of different types of traffic, such as voice, video, data. It's very complex and very, very time consuming. You also want to ensure your scalability and resource availability. So traditional large scale networks testing demands a significant amount of resources, training personnel, it can be costly, and you may have limited access to like live networks. So you might not be able to test on a live network. It's best to do it in the lab again before you go to production. And we want to be able to adapt quickly to changes. Um, so defending against cyber threats like DDoS attacks, malware, advanced hacking, this requires up-to-date intelligence and realistic, repeatable test environments. So we want to be able to kind of wrap all this up and do all of these things in the lab. So one of our modern approaches is to combine network emulation and traffic generation to give a realistic, adaptable, and controlled test environment. So we want to be able to simultaneously generate real world application and dynamic traffic attacks, dynamic attack traffic, and scale it up and test it under realistic network conditions. You can utilize the network emulation to simulate latency, jitter, packet loss, bandwidth limits, mimicking weather patterns, and remote connections. So when it comes to tactical networks, we normally see non-terrestrial links, and things are very dynamic when it comes to latency, jitter, packet loss, etc. So if you combined the traffic generator to recreate your traffic, as well as the WAN emulator, you can get very, very accurate results in your lab. So let's take a look at some of the use cases we have out there. I'm going to try and go through these a little quickly because there's a bunch of them. So the first one, we have a typical satellite network. Over here on the left, I hope you can see my mouse. We might have a command center, and then that's going to go through some, local infrastructure, maybe a TCP accelerator, hit the satellite modem, go up to the satellite, and then eventually reach out to whatever it may be on the other end, whether it's a drone, in this case, a submarine, a tank, or even some soldiers out in the field. So this is the typical satellite network. So when we get in the lab with our traffic generator, we can emulate everything in this little dashed box on both sides, right? So you can plug your traffic generator on one side of this connection and then either the same or a different traffic generator on that side, and we will emulate we're these applications, and we can emulate like we are these different destinations over here, right? So we can replicate a mix of application traffic at high scale. We can measure the performances like throughput, latency, packet loss, and by the application type. We can also saturate the network, right? And you have mission critical applications that should take higher priority than someone just sending email or maybe doing something low priority. And you want to make sure those are working, right? But this could be very expensive because using a satellite, I read a statement, an article once that said a satellite on average is about $1 a minute, right? So if you don't want to spend that $1 a minute, we can actually use our network emulator. So here we're going to go into some of the challenges of testing live satellites. So it's essential for performance evaluation, but cost, limited access, and variable network conditions make it challenging, right? So you might not have access to it. It might be really expensive. You might not only be able to use it because it's in production. So getting access to it can be very, very difficult. So if we bring in a network emulator and you don't have to pay or wait or even wait for a bad condition to happen in the real world, we can insert this network emulator, and it allows you to control the environment and assess how many different traffic patterns and network conditions affect the application or your mission critical application. So here's a little diagram with the network emulator now in the middle rather than paying for that satellite. So with the network emulator, we can control the network impairments like latency, link or signal flapping, bandwidth constraints, and loss. And we can even replicate things like rain, snowstorms, solar flares, etc. You can do all of that in your lab at a fraction of the cost, right? And you always want to be able to test under the best possible conditions all the way to the worst possible conditions. I always tell my customers, don't worry about, almost failing. Figure out where your failure point is and how to recognize you're going to failure so you can actually make changes or respond to that failure about to happen. So I always tell my customers, take it to failure, extend that, and then take it to failure again. We can also be very, very reliable and accurate and repeatable with a WAN emulator. So if you're actually using a real satellite, you obviously can't tell it to say, hey, give me more latency, or hey, pretend like you're getting a solar flare or something like that. So with the WAN emulator, the network emulator, we can actually do this in real time. So in this scenario, we have the traffic generator creating the application streams and also emulating the destination. And then we have the network emulator actually creating imperfect satellite conditions. And we can run the test and get a really good idea on how well our applications are going to run over different satellite scenarios. Okay, so next generation firewall testing. With next generation firewall testing, we can generate realistic application traffic and security attacks. So if you're not familiar with the security attacks, we can do malware, viruses, CVEs, and we can do this all at scale. We also do a lot of work evaluating firewall's ability to filter malicious traffic while allowing valid traffic without, hopefully it's not going to degrade the performance. So you want to make sure the good traffic is getting through and the bad traffic is getting blocked. And using a traffic generator we can also use a traffic generator to establish and terminate TCP and UDP sessions at a high scale. So that way we can assess the firewall session limits. So for example, a lot of people will buy a firewall because it says, oh, it can handle 5,000 clients. But what we're finding out in the real world is, sure, it can handle 5,000 clients. But what if those clients are running applications that open up hundreds and possibly, many hundreds of sessions? So what we're finding in the real world is that firewalls are failing when they get to 500,000 sessions per second, or 750,000 sessions per second, or even 1 million sessions per second. So sure, you can handle 5,000 clients, but maybe opening all those sessions is keeping the firewall from doing its job. So some of the symptoms we'll see is bandwidth will go down, or there'll be drops in packets, or the firewall seizes up. And you can, log in and look at the CPU and it's at 100%. So it's really good to test the sessions that are going through the firewall. And again, all of these dotted lines, we can emulate these using our traffic generator. So not only can we emulate application traffic, attack traffic, the clients. We can also, on the other side, emulate the destination. So all of this traffic can run through this firewall, and we can check, hey, does the firewall block this malware? Does this firewall block content that should be blocked, maybe BitTorrent or something else, or specific ports on for specific applications might need to be blocked. So we can emulate and create traffic on both sides of the firewall. And you can do this in your lab, so you don't have to harm your production network. You don't have to put your production network under any stress. And it's always good to test before you deploy. Okay, so again, this is cyber range attack. I kind of touched on that in the last slide. So we have over 13,000 different types of attacks we can send through your firewall. And working with the Department of Defense, a lot of times before they can put something in theater, it needs to pass certain certifications. And you can use us again to send all this malicious traffic through and get your certification. Even we have customers who will buy the same type of firewall over and over again, but just because it's the same brand and the same model, it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be certified before it goes into theater. So we have had stories of taking, weeks to test a single firewall or a single network switch. And now with our device, they can do it in a couple days. Great. Okay, so SD-WAN evaluation and optimization. This is something we do a lot. Normally, we're working with a contractor, and maybe they're working with one of the defense or the armed services, and they say, hey, contractor, what SD-WAN routers should we buy? And the contractor will say, okay, well, if you're doing this, this, and this brand might be best, or that brand might be best, or that man might be best. And then the armed forces might turn around and say, well, show me why. So we do a lot of testing of different SD-WAN equipment to verify it will do what that exact contract is going to need to do. So whether it's just moving big files from one place to another or allowing some database. So the equipment, different manufacturers might have better equipment for different applications. So what we do is we can come in the lab. Again, you'll put your different SD-WAN equipment in the lab. And not only can we emulate the clients, we can emulate like it's the cloud if you're using Office 360 or maybe AWS's Armed Services Cloud. And then we can also emulate like we're data center application servers, etc. And we can stress test. And what the clients normally do is they try one SD-WAN gateway, measure it, use our reports, switch it out for a different SD-WAN gateway, measure it, generate reports, and then maybe a third. And then they will hand those reports to whomever they're trying to fill that contract out for. So we are very good at gauging what SD-WAN products will work best for the applications that you're installing for. Okay, so quality of service testing as well. Again, we're going to be using the traffic generator, and if you want, you can throw the network emulator in there as well. So quality of service, our QoS, you want to make sure your mission critical applications are going to be getting the prioritization over the unimportant traffic. So we can employ a network emulator to create multiple different types of distinct network conditions. We can verify that in this case, these modems prioritize the application traffic according to QoS policies. And we can measure the level of performance and ensure that critical applications receive priority when network resources are limited. So with this network emulator, we can actually squeeze down uh, the bandwidth, or we can start adding in lots of drops, and you can just verify, hey, my mission critical application is getting through while all the unimportant stuff is getting dropped or left behind, etc. So video streaming, uh, believe it or not, live video capabilities are essential in the modern warfare, right? Offering critical information for command and control, enhancing operation effectiveness, and supporting real-time decision-making processes, right? So we see a lot of basically real-time video with the armed forces now. There's always some guy in the command center watching what's going on, whether it's a drone shot, or even we're seeing devices on actual soldiers and vehicles. And again, with the network emulator, we can control impairments, latency, throughput, packet ordering, packet loss. Again, we also want to test under the worst case scenarios, right? So if you have actual people in theater going into battle, you want to make sure you can see what needs to be there. We always know recon is very important. And then in the lab, of course, we can conduct the test reliable, repeatable, and we won't have to worry about figuring out, oh, how do we do partly cloudy? How do we do it if the microwave dish is slightly, got moved and it's not exactly synced up with the receiver? We can do all of this in the lab without having to use a satellite network. Okay, site performance testing. This is pretty self-explanatory. Again, everything in the dots is the traffic generator, right? We can put one traffic generator on one site, another traffic generator on the other site, and we can verify the throughput. If you're like replicating, you can see how well it works. You can pass traffic between them at scale. You can evaluate the WAN accelerators, sorry. We can generate a variety of different mixes and protocols. Another thing that we can do that is really cool is you can actually use like Wireshark or TCP dump and get your own PCAP, and you can put it into our traffic generator and replay that payload, and you can replay that conversation. Not only can you just replay it one-to-one, but you can actually multiply that. So you, instead of, maybe someone is using a video conferencing, you can make, even if it's just two people on that video conferencing, with that PCAP, we can make it look like hundreds or thousands of people are video conferencing. So you can actually replay existing traffic. Okay, so that's everything for that. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Go ahead and put it in the Q&A.
So we do have one question already, and it asks, which components are hardware versus software?
So we offer both. Technically, we have both the network emulator and the traffic generator. Most of our sales are hardware, but we do offer virtual appliances as well, and those run in VMware and KVM if you're a Linux user. All right, any other questions? If you do think of more questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer them for you. And if you have some specific scenarios that you'd like us to cover with you, we're very good at doing demos for specific scenarios.
Well, I don't see any more questions, so I guess I'll say thank you so much for joining us today. And yes, we can provide the slides to the attendees as well.
Right.
Thank you all. We'll also be sending out an email with Rebecca and Kate's contact information in case you have any follow-up questions.